This is a public health announcement. Brought to you by Heather Shepard.
The Primal Pioneer. Live an outdoor life.
This is the Primal Pioneer podcast, a show dedicated to helping you achieve optimal health by making radical lifestyle, dietary, and environmental shifts to support forward movement with your health. I'm your host, Heather Shepard, radical health practitioner, gut health specialist, and homeopathic doctor in training. When I was 23 years old, I suffered a TBI, otherwise known as a traumatic brain injury. This shifted my life from being a super athletic type A kind of person to being completely sidelined from physical activity for nearly 12 years. During that time, I tried every modality under the sun, desperately yearning, trying, and hoping to get better. It wasn't until I stepped outside of the conventional medical model and even much of the alternative medical model that I saw real, lasting progress with my health. Today, I help thousands of people overcome both acute and chronic ailments using my nature plus science-based radical approach to health, which targets the most important yet most overlooked aspects of health and wellness. Today's episode is all about overcoming root causes of carb and sugar cravings. Throughout this episode, I discuss the 4 key driving factors behind carb and sugar cravings and how you can start to overcome these issues. I also discuss my qualms around intermittent fasting and trendy diets and discuss the number one most overlooked yet most important link to our metabolic health that 100% of diets at this time fail to address. Enjoy. Okay, here's episode 36, what to do when you crave sugar. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. Today I'm going to talk all about sugar cravings, why they occur, and what they mean, and how you can start to overcome these cravings. One of the most common questions I get asked on my social media platforms, especially the Keto Cancer Solution, is how can I kick my sugar habit? To effectively do so, we need to take a look at 4 key layers. And those are, number 1, your metabolic health. Number 2, your daily eating schedule. Number 3, energy management. Are you losing or gaining energy from your environment? And number 4, your constitution. So to help you grasp the full picture here behind your sugar and carb cravings, I'm going to touch upon these 4 core elements to help you kick the sugar craving bucket from a root place. So let's dive right in here. Number 1, metabolic health. Today, literally millions upon millions of people across the world struggle with metabolic health. And not everybody knows they're struggling with some metabolic health condition. In fact, most people have no idea that they're struggling with a metabolic health condition. They just think they have high blood pressure or Hashimoto's or autoimmunity or poor memory or compromised digestion. And really all of these things are rooted in, from a physical standpoint, poor metabolic health. And I just want to be clear about what is metabolic health, because a lot of us think of metabolism as our ability to burn our food. And while there is some truth, some accuracy in this, I want to give you kind of a bigger perspective of what metabolic health actually means, a more accurate perspective, I should say. So your metabolic health isn't just your ability to burn food and have a bowel movement. So some people think of themselves as a really quick, efficient metabolizer where they can eat everything under the sun. They're still super skinny. It goes right through them, right? We all know people like this. Maybe you're somebody like this, right? I'm definitely not one of those people, but there are, that's one kind of metabolizer, so to speak. And then we have people, if we go to the total opposite end of the spectrum, that they tend to be slower metabolizers where They don't have a huge appetite, and it seems to take forever for their food to get to the other end of the track and produce a bowel movement. And while this is one element of our metabolic health, there's a much bigger, accurate way to look at metabolic health. And this can be summed up very precisely. It's your ability to produce energy at the mitochondrial level. If you can do this efficiently and effectively, your metabolic health, aka your ability to produce energy, have stamina, not feel super fatigued throughout your day and sleep well at night, these things will all be really amazing most of the time. Now, here's the thing with metabolic health. Most people today don't have a passing grade when it comes to their metabolic health. Believe me, I've been there. I've had a failing grade in this area for quite some time. And incorporating all of these elements into my life, the Sunlight RX, the Metabolic Reset program, mitigating my EMFs, and literally just being outside more has done wonders for my metabolic health. I've gone from an F, I'd give myself an A. And I usually am critical of myself. So that's a pretty big thing for me to say. So what I really want you all to know is that even if you have a failing grade right now with your metabolic health, know that you can turn it around, and you can turn it around pretty effectively, sometimes easier than you might suspect, simply by following all the things that I teach you here on this podcast and all these four elements, these core elements I'm outlining here for you today. So keep that in mind. Even if your metabolic health is currently not so hot, there are ways that you can improve this. And really, millions of people struggle with their metabolic health. Some know it, some don't know it. It's becoming more well known that our chronic diseases today are on the physical layers are rooted in poor metabolic health. So we see and we continue to see exploding numbers of chronic diseases, autoimmune conditions, allergies, asthma cases, type 2 diabetes. All of these chronic diseases today are considered metabolic diseases. So that also includes things like cancer, type 2 diabetes, autoimmunity, Alzheimer's, chronic fatigue, chronic anxiety and depression states, hormonal disorders, poor sleep. Those are some of the biggest key disorders that are all rooted in metabolic insufficiency from a physical standpoint. So if you're someone who falls into any of those categories, if you raise your hand for any of those things, keep in mind that your metabolic health is likely off and that there's a lot you can do to rectify it. And just to really be clear, because we think of our metabolism in a very linear way that it's just about the foods we eat. But poor metabolic health doesn't just occur by eating a poor diet. Yes, of course it does, but it occurs from eating a diet high in carbs during the wrong times of year. And I talk a lot about this in previous episodes, all about carbohydrate metabolism, how to improve carbohydrate metabolism, because carbohydrates aren't inherently bad. Is that we totally disregard nature's laws and eat carbohydrates all times of the year when they're actually not available to us all times of the year. So our metabolic disorders, however, are not driven by excessive carbohydrate intake. While many people will tell you this, and a lot of the trendy diets out there really emphasize this, rather, our metabolic diseases from a dietary standpoint, they stem from eating carbohydrates during the wrong times of year, and I can even say during the wrong times of day also. But also two core aspects that drive our metabolic health are sunlight and artificial light. So there's a lot of ophthalmologists, I shouldn't say a lot, there are some ophthalmologists mostly in times past, that have done extensive research correlating our metabolism, our metabolic sufficiency or inefficiency with the light that we're exposed to. For some reason, the scientific literature of these times got totally swept under the carpet and replaced with all these non-biased, heavily funded, heavily weighed studies that promote things like cataract surgery, which will totally throw one into type 2 diabetes. Even the ophthalmologists know this. It's a direct side effect. And they're like, oh, I don't know why. Well, it's because in cataract surgery, the lens that is put in totally blocks UV light. I even believe it blocks red light. And that's the light that you need to drive all your metabolic, hormonal signalings in your body. And as soon as you take that away from somebody, they immediately get type 2 diabetes. So we cannot just point the finger at carbohydrates and sugar when it comes to all of our metabolic diseases. If we really want to get the story accurate and give ourselves the best opportunity to overcome metabolic conditions, we cannot simply limit carbs and sugars like the ketogenic diet promotes. We have to also include these aspects of sunlight and mitigate our artificial light exposure to effectively rectify and improve our metabolic health. And at this point in time, this is where 100% of the diets fail because they focus on food versus encompassing this aspect of food and sunlight. What most people have totally thrown out the door is that our food is actually grown in sunlight. And when we eat that food, when we metabolize it to turn it into energy, the light environment that it's grown in and the light environment that we are living in is a big deal. And most people take this far too lightly, or they just simply don't consider it, but it's one of the most primal, fundamental aspects to the food chain, how we eat food, how we prepare food, what's available to us, that is out there. It's one of the most primal, basic, foundational things, but we've totally thrown it out the door and swapped it for these, fancy dietary trends. Really, we can support our metabolic health by literally going back to the basics. And this not only includes food, but also the light environment. So what does this have to do with your sugar cravings? Well, the less energy efficient you are. So let's say you're eating carbs at the wrong time of year. Let's say you're in front of artificial light much of the day, much more so than sunlight. And then over time, what happens is you become less energy efficient when you're living in these types of environments, right? And the more progressed your metabolic health becomes when you're constantly living in this state, eating carbs during the wrong times of year, being bombarded by artificial light, not getting enough sunlight. These are some core ways that you will set the stage for metabolic health struggles, and you become energy inefficient. And the more energy inefficient you come, the more carbs and sugar you'll crave. When you're energy inefficient, you crave foods that will give you a quick, fast burst of energy. However, staying in this cycle, it's super problematic to health. It keeps us in a vicious cycle of carb craving and food addictions, which further fuels metabolic diseases. So if you have a metabolic disease, or if you have the beginning stages of this, and what that might look like is, poor sleep, low energy levels, moodiness, hormonal imbalances, infertility, menstrual irregularities, or compromised digestion. Okay, these are some of the beginning stages or signs of metabolic insufficiency. We need to first improve your ability to produce and pump out high octane energy. Then you can recharge your battery and reestablish solid metabolic health. And when you do this, sugar cravings will naturally and easily subside. If you're ready to prevent or overcome a metabolic health related struggle, you're in luck. Now, for the first time, a truly holistic and integrative approach to metabolic health will soon be available. This November 2020, I'll be launching the Metabolic Reset Program, a program that incorporates diet, sunlight, seasonal eating, and much more into the metabolic health protocol. After witnessing the continued health successes with myself, my loved ones, and my clients, I'm ready to offer this truly health transformative program to you all. If you're ready to get to the root of your metabolic health struggles, you can get started right now. Head over to my site, heathershepard.com. That's HeatherShepard.com. Click on the courses tab to reserve your spot in the Metabolic Reset Program that will be launching this November 2020. I can't wait to help you get to the root of your metabolic health struggles and begin to experience long-term health success as a result. Now let's head back to the episode all about sugar and carb cravings. Okay, let's go to number 2, the daily eating schedule. Today, many people have thrown their metabolic health out of whack with their daily eating schedule. We're taught so much trendy dietary nonsense today. Sorry, I'm just going to be blunt. That many people have no idea how to eat. They don't know what to eat. They don't know when to eat. They don't know how much to eat. We've gotten so much in our heads when it comes to eating that we've literally thrown our primal survival instincts out the door and have traded them for Dr. Google and trendy diets. I've been there. So I completely know it's very easy to be influenced, to be swayed with what is posted on Google and these articles that really, if you want to know if a certain food or diet is going to be a good fit, if it's really rooted. Forget the science, because most science is totally biased today. It's funded by the industry that, is trying to get a specific outcome for the study. Peer-reviewed studies can be better, but studies today, people post studies all the time on Facebook, and I'm like, you forget the studies. They're horrible. They're poorly funded. They're heavily influenced to get a specific outcome. If you really want to know the truth about something, go back to the basics, okay? And the basics include the light environment, okay? How does the food, what light environment was the food grown in? What light environment are you in? These are very basic, foundational, primal things. And we've kind of, thrown these out the window for the sexy, trendy dietary advice that we're being given today. And it's doing many people a disservice. And I understand that some of it may be super well-intentioned, but really, if you want to know the truth about something when it comes to diet, we really need to get back to the basics, the foundation, okay? And we need to look at the light environment to really get a grasp of if that is a good food or dietary practice for us. Now, when it comes to our cravings, specifically sugar cravings, nothing will fuel the carb munchies more than these aspects around meal timing. So we have number 1, skipping breakfast. Number 2, bulletproofing for breakfast. Number 3, intermittent fasting through breakfast. Number 4, eating late at night. Number 5, eating late at night while in front of a screen. And number 6, eating small, frequent meals throughout the day. Now, let's take intermittent fasting because it's such a hot, trendy topic right now. Okay, everybody needs to try intermittent fasting because of its positive effects on autophagy and cancer and weight maintenance and etc. I want to mention that, and I've mentioned this so many times, but there could be new listeners tuning into this episode, so I really want to make a point of this because it's very important. Intermittent fasting was an amazing practice for our ancient ancestors who had the metabolic sufficiency and, how do I want to say this, strength to do that, to go about that without placing stress on their endocrine organs, or I should say too much stress. They could do these things like intermittent fasting because they naturally led an outdoor life. So what happens in intermittent fasting? Okay, so from one standpoint, from a modern standpoint, most people who do intermittent fasting, they're going to do so while indoors, drinking, bottled water, and probably laying down much of the day because they're absolutely, fatigued. I mean, modern people are going to be extremely floored from intermittent fasting. I mean, for the most part, and because of the environment we're doing it in, and because our modern bodies are in such a compromised state compared to our ancient ancestors. There weren't as many diseases then, and there's many more diseases now, and in far greater number because of our lifestyles. Most people are not equipped to handle intermittent fasting, particularly women, due to our hormonal and endocrine needs. So, while intermittent fasting there can be a place in the lifestyle for this, I hardly, if ever, recommend starting with this if you're just starting, say, a cancer healing program, keto, a weight loss program. If you currently have a metabolic condition, or if you're in the beginning stages, if you have some of those beginning symptoms or signs of a metabolic disorder, starting with intermittent fasting is a big red flag and is a big no-no in my experience. It can, with some people, be introduced later on, but starting with this when there's already metabolic insufficiency is like adding kerosene to the fire. It's not going to be a pretty picture, and this is why a lot of people, most people who do intermittent fasting today, they have a strong will, they have a strong character, they have this, I'm going to say stubbornness for the lack of a word, and not that it's a good or a bad thing in this sense, but they can do it because they're told it's going to help them. So, however, if there's already a metabolic condition in place, you do not want to start with something like intermittent fasting, bulletproofing through breakfast, etc. This is going to further fuel poor metabolic health. Okay, so if you do any of these practices around your meal timing, okay, and I'll list these here again just for you all: skipping breakfast, bulletproofing for breakfast, intermittent fasting through breakfast, eating late at night while in front of a screen, or eating small, frequent meals throughout the day, any of those practices are going to further compromise metabolic health. So if you're someone who's raised your hand to any of those meal timing practices, this is likely a big culprit to your carb and sugar cravings. Let's go to number 3, energy management. Are you losing or gaining energy from your environment? 3.5 billion years ago, nature designed us, you and I, to survive by gaining energy from our environment. And we're hardwired to do this by being connected to the sun and nature, our feet planted in the ground, we're swimming in the ocean, dipping in a creek, walking in the forest, sleeping grounded. All of these things, we're hardwired to be in contact with nature, with our environment in this way. Today, we are so far removed from this original blueprint. And instead of gaining energy from our environment like our ancient ancestors did, we're losing energy to our environment. And when we lose energy to our environment, we become energy inefficient. And we set the stage for chronic disease, chronic health states, and metabolic diseases. So now you might be thinking, well, okay, how are we losing energy to our environment? And this happens in 2 simple ways. Living indoors, so leading primarily an indoor life, and modern technology. These are the biggest energy sucks that we are in contact with and that we practice pretty much every day. So we're always on our cell phones, we're inside, we're around cell towers, Wi-Fi. This is my new favorite one. We have robots delivering takeout food that are they're hooked up to these city satellites. And that's just not okay. Like, that's insane. That's not okay to have robots delivering our takeout food. When I first heard this, I was like, I can't wrap my head around this. And, it's so far removed from our primal blueprint, and, they're hooked up to these satellites. So now not only are we having, more cell towers in our cities, but bigger cities are now putting in these satellites so that the robots can deliver food. So, I'm not sure what was wrong with humans delivering food or humans picking up their food. I'm not sure where we, thought the robots were going to do a better job. Probably just, obviously it'd be far too expensive to pay people to deliver food. So why don't we just use a robot? I mean, right? So what I'm trying to say is that all of these things, they suck the life force right out of us. We lose our energy, which is in the form of electrons, where we end up losing electrons to our environment. And most people today, we're undernatured. We're an undernatured society. And so we never give our battery a chance to recharge and a chance to reboot. And we don't need to do this, when we're on vacation and like that's when we reboot. We need to do this every single day. Okay. And so this is really huge, because when you're constantly losing energy to your environment, say you're always on your cell phone, you're working on your computer, this is why I developed the EMF 101 course. It's why I've created the Metabolic Reset program, because we need to learn how to gain energy from our environment, from our food, from sun, so we can start to recharge our battery. And today we're simply not doing that. And there's ways that we can do that. So when this happens though, when we are constantly losing energy to our environment, this is when the cravings come in. We crave the low nutrient, quick energy burning carbs and sugars, and eventually the endocrine system goes awry, insulin production starts to fail, and your energy levels tank. This is a direct result of losing far too much energy to your environment. And it's like when your iPhone battery's low, we're really quick to put that on the charger. But when our battery's low, we're not so quick to put ourselves on the charger. And that involves getting out in nature. So in order to truly get to the root of carbohydrate and sugar cravings, you have to start gaining energy from your environment. This is the whole deal behind the Sunlight RX, the Metabolic Reset program. These are core aspects of these two key things that I'm very passionate about and that I offer to the world to help them regain their energy. Let's get into number 4, your constitution. So we always have to take the individual constitution into consideration when it comes to any acute or chronic condition, and even when it comes to carbohydrate and sugar cravings. Most people, they want to, read a Google article on, okay, how do I kick my sugar cravings? And while the physical things that I've just outlined for you are very important parts of overcoming carbohydrate and sugar cravings, it's important to keep in mind that not everybody craves carbs and sugars for the same reasons. Yes, they're likely have a sunlight deficiency. Yes, they're likely losing energy to their environment. Yes, they have a metabolic disease or are in some pre-metabolic condition state. However, we also need to look at the deeper layers. I'm all about looking at the root causes, the individual causes, the root causes of the disease or the disorder or the craving, whatever it may be. And to do so, we need to look at the individual. Not everybody craves carbs and sugars for the same reasons. And so really, here's when we get into the emotional factors. So we have to take some of these basic, common emotional disharmonies into consideration when it comes to carb and sugar cravings. So those are like lack of self-worth, feelings of guilt or lack in general, feelings of jealousy, grief, feeling apathetic, depressed states, anxiety states, pain, physical, emotional, mental. These things are very unique to the individual. And to remove core chemical imbalances fueling carbohydrate and sugar cravings, we must look at the mental emotional picture as well. And this picture varies depending on the individual and their unique life experiences. So, once we've established the core emotions that one struggles with, maybe it's grief, maybe they haven't felt the same since somebody they loved passed away and they're in this deep grieving state, or they had this breakup with their partner and since then they've been in this grieving state, or they've created distance. They said, I'm never going to be in a relationship again, and they've kind of internalized their pain. Or maybe they have this sort of jealousy. They have an underlying jealousy, or are really critical about themselves or others, or they're very jealous. These things are things we have to take into consideration, because these emotions, when they're not dealt with, they fuel reactions in life. And one thing that they fuel is our cravings. Now, that could absolutely be around some kind of recreational drug, even marijuana or, cocaine or any recreational drug, but also carbohydrates and sugars. So once we've established the core emotions that one struggles with, then we can start to change these deep-seated emotional struggles and help one move towards a healthier mental emotional state. Now, my number one modality of preference for accessing these deep-seated emotional patterns is homeopathy. Has the unique and potent ability to remove unhealthy mental emotional patterns that are almost always behind carbohydrate and sugar cravings, especially long term, right? So recently I did an episode, actually Jen and I, my partner Jen and I did an episode where we interviewed a joint client of ours, Linda. And during that episode, this topic actually came up where we talked about my client's struggle around food cravings, her mindset around food, her approach to food, her thinking there's never going to be enough food, so she has to eat a lot of food. And so we talked about this struggle of hers and how after engaging in homeopathic care together, that this pattern shifted. And I want to mention this because most people look to the physical diet as a means to overcoming carbohydrate and sugar cravings, and they'll really make strict rules for themselves, right? And while this can help in the short term, when it comes to the long term, the cravings are always there underneath the surface because the emotional layers haven't been dealt with. And homeopathy is a very potent, effective way to help address these layers. The key with homeopathy is that you need to have the correct remedy in the correct potency, and the correct dosage needs to be given. And when you do this, you can really experience remarkable results. Okay, I hope you all enjoyed this episode, found it insightful and inspiring around your health and healing, specifically around carb and sugar cravings. And I'll look forward to seeing you all next week. The Primal Pioneer podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease in the Western medical sense or terms. It is to be used for educational and informational purposes only. The information shared on this podcast and all of Heather Shepard's work is not a form of diagnostic medicine, nor is it a medical treatment. Heather Shepard is a health educator, radical health practitioner, and a trained EMF specialist. And although she has a bachelor's in science and master's education in alternative medicine, she is not a medical doctor and does not give medical advice. Her work and sharing is to be used for informational and educational purposes only. Thanks so much to all of you who tuned into the episode today, all about sugar and carb cravings. I hope this gave you some fresh, new, enlightening perspective as to how to really get to the heart of the issues that literally millions of people struggle with around carb and sugar cravings. I myself used to be one of them. Once I incorporated the metabolic reset diet, Once I learned how to mitigate my artificial light environment, and once I started to commit to the Sunlight RX practice and weave all of these things into my daily healthcare, self-care practice, I began to see immediate improvements in my metabolic health, and the long-term benefits continue to blow me away each day as well. For those of you who enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to post a 5-star review with your comments and support. This is such an amazing way to fuel and motivate my continued podcasting and sharing via this platform, and is a great way to help spread the word to others searching for deeper answers around their health. I thank you so much for this support. As always, you can follow me on Instagram at sunlight_RX or on Facebook, Heather Shepherd, and visit me on my site, heathershepherd.com. Keep up the awesome healing work, everyone, and I'll see you next week.